And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple. Coming to us straight from Team Harvest, the lead man behind Sword in the Abyss, which we'll be getting into tonight, the one and only Vincent Santos. How you doing today,
Hello.
man?
Hello, all good, all good. I must admit, I've been a little bit nervous and anxious about today, but all is good. All is good. I hope you're good too.
Yep. Well, I hope that I can work some of that anxiousness out of the system. Oh. I realize that everybody gets nervous talking with somebody taller than them. I can make that joke. I'm 6'6", so.
That is quite the impressive number. Yeah, no, I'm like 5. I still don't know yet. I'm like 5'10" and a half or something like that. 5'10".
Yeah.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah, depends on who you ask and which version of Imperial you're using. So, one of the traditions around here is opening with the humble beginnings, in a sense. So, I'd like you to walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Wow, my very first introduction to a role-playing game. Oof. Wow. We had to dig back into. It's not that quite old. It's not quite old. I actually started with D&D 5th edition. Actually, back when it was first coming out, I believe. I can't give you the exact year, but one of my friends at the time was interested in playing it, and little by little we got a little group together, and we eventually got around to playing in our first. I remember playing as a paladin. Back then, that was my very first character. Got through a couple of sessions, so I got a little bit busy and couldn't participate anymore in that. But yeah, that's my very first endeavor into role-playing games. Then after that, I remember getting into like Pathfinder and some of the online video games of it as well, like the Neverwinter or something like that. I can't remember the exact one. It was like a modified version of it. Then there was also, I got through in playing like City of Mist at one point and Call of Cthulhu at a minor amount and stuff like that. I don't know if you would count this considering the beginnings of role-playing games with D&D first edition, but I did play war games before I played
I'll allow it.
Role-playing games. Yeah, I did play war games.
Are there any particular standouts when it comes to war game play that are of note?
War game play. So I mostly played a very bootleg version of Warhammer 40,000. I believe it was 7th edition at the time, or something like that. And then I also got to play a little bit of Bolt Action at some point later on.
Yeah, that tracks. I always bring up that when I did play the war game version of 40K, a lot of people would cringe because they knew I was going to break out. I had a Imperial Guard Salamander army that was abusing the Creed rule back then. It's just that instead of hiding like a Warhound Titan, because I didn't have one, I don't have that kind of cash. I would hide like Terminus pattern Land Raiders. Say, oh, that's a very nice vehicle you have. It'd be a shame if it got skewered by 8x8 las guns or las cannons, I should say.
Oh my god!
Because I'm not sure if you remember the Creed rule, but Usakar Creed had this thing where any unit that he's attached to becomes a scout unit. So
that means go ahead.
So you could have scout armor because of the whole thing of if it's close to 2 inches away, then it counts as attached to the unit.
Jesus. I actually cannot quote much about seventh edition of Warhammer 40k. I assume the scout role means that you could deploy ahead of your deployment zone. Am I incorrect in that assumption?
Deploy ahead and also surprise them. Because they're just coming around, then all of a sudden they're within firing range of like a Titan or something.
From what I mostly remember is actually from like the more recent ones, like 8th, 9th.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 8th and 9th edition are almost the same.
Yeah.
Almost.
I will admit I played more fantasy than 40k. Sometimes playing with undead and in one and messing around with Sigmar, and one of my favorite abilities in just how absurd it is Hand of Dust with Nagash, which the whole idea is you take one dice, hide it behind your hands. Your opponent has to guess which hand it is. If he guesses the wrong hand, then the unit you're targeting disappears. Normally, that should in any other circumstance that should just be a roll of odds or evens. But the fact that you have to go with the kind of mind game bullshit you'd expect out of like the drinking scene from The Princess Bride makes it all the more hilarious.
Oh man.
Especially when you got somebody like me who's gonna cheat and put the dice in his pocket or in his sleeve when they're not looking, so that no matter which one they pick, they're wrong.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I mean, is it a bit dickish? Yes, but there's no rule that says that it has to be in one of my hands when I put it behind my back.
Oh, I suppose that is true.
I believe these days they call that malicious compliance. But given that you jumped around between a bunch of different systems, walk me through the chain of events that led to creating Sword in the Abyss.
Okay, so Sword in the Abyss did not. Okay, so originally, Sword in the Abyss actually had a different name back when it was first being developed. I won't mention the name just so I won't confuse anyone. But it actually had a different project name in its earliest days, and back then it was not. I was not taking it as a very serious project. It was more like a side little thing that I was working on little by little. And the reason why I started it to begin with was because I remember playing D&D, and the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to create I barely even knew anything about the game. I just knew I wanted to play some kind of like lightning soldier kind of deal, like something like quite custom and stuff like that. And I understand you can achieve something like that by playing like a Tempest cleric or something.
Yeah, but it's not very elegant, and picking a cleric has its own caveats.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like I just found it quite limiting D&D. And then I played Pathfinder. It also has like a class structured system. But it had the feat system, which I quite liked. At least second edition does. I heard rumors about Pathfinder first edition being quite complicated. I don't know how true those rumors are and stuff because I never got to play it.
Is a fork of D&D third edition, which had its infamy when it came to beginners traps. Traps that were built in because Cook was on that ivory tower bullshit back then. Whereas Pathfinder second edition doubled down on its feat system, as well as its action economy, which I actually enjoyed. Whereas 5th edition has feats, but I would, even back then I was vocal about the fact that the feat system in D&D 5th edition was a masterclass in missing the point. Because feats were meant to be a kind of personalization of your character. Now, back in 3rd edition, the amount of feats and the amount of feat tax problems got ridiculously out of hand after a few years. No, I'm not going to whitewash that. But that doesn't mean swinging the pendulum the other way is the best option. And I can. It sounds to me based on bringing up Pathfinder Second that you wanted to double down on that kind of customization built around feats, built around little tricks, as opposed to having to focus on one particular area.
Yes, a little bit. So it's like, yeah, I was exposed to Pathfinder Second Edition, and then it's like, oh, like I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing like the feat system is very cool. Like I like how each class and each race and stuff like that has each different abilities. But for the most part, to be honest, I found it a little bit, especially like on the cultural side of things, or like the species. I don't remember what it's specifically called. The ancestry feats.
I always call it race just because I'm not paid by the syllable. And I'm not given. I'm not going to use a different name for the same thing depending on which game it's in.
Yeah, that's fair. Like you're playing so many different systems, it's too much.
Like I said, I'm not getting paid by the syllable.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see that.
Mm-hmm.
Now. I will note with some of the material that you sent me, you put in a whole blurb about influences, and I'd like to go through some of the entries in there as far as influence to kind of see what about that particular IP was an influence and how that was carried over into. I'm gonna call it CETA from here on because again, not paid by the syllable.
It's quite long.
One of these days, I'm going to try and make like a one-page thing for Zine Quest, but have it have the longest name possible just to troll everybody. But I suppose one of the first ones I'll go with is Alundra, and I'm assuming we're talking the original Alundra, not Alundra 2.
Yes, we're talking about the original Alundra from PlayStation 1, although both Alundras were from PlayStation 1. The original one from PlayStation 1, I quite just like the aesthetic of that game in general, like the art style. I like the gameplay itself. It's basically kind of like a Zelda Plus, if you may, but it had like some cool narrative choices and stuff like that I really like, and just like the basics of the gameplay was just pretty nice. And I just like the elves themselves. They're not really. I don't know if they ever referred to them as elves in game, but they're humans with longer ears and stuff like that. And yeah. So influentially, it's more like from an artistic point of view, is the influence from that one.
Yeah. Did you ever play its predecessor, Landstalker?
No, I did not get to play its predecessor. I'm aware of it though.
So next of course would be Berserk, and I think the influences there are pretty obvious.
Yes, yeah. So Berserk, for those who don't know, is an anime that's quite dark, quite gritty in its story and its artistic choices and stuff like that. And so yes, I borrowed quite a bit. I wouldn't say I borrowed. It's more like Berserk sits in my mind as one of my favorite IPs, so it's going to influence the way I draw things, or like the way I see things, or like the kind of fantasy that I enjoy. I like darkness.
Darkness is one thing, but I think the key there, and maybe you end up coming to the same conclusion, is a dark world, but people still don't succumb to that darkness. They're still trying to struggle to make something better or fulfill a particular ambition.
Yes.
I had in the past on this channel, I've had a bit of a discussion about why Berserk has just been cursed when it comes to its adaptations. And I do remember somebody saying that maybe From Software should make a Berserk game. Technically, they did that 3 times already. But I think I think the reason it's had its run of luck when it comes to like anime adaptations is for the same reason why there's problems adapting any seinen work into animation. Because you look at the other manga that are part of the big 4 of seinen. they all have very detailed art styles. I think this is the reason you see more shonen anime adaptations, because you don't have as detailed of an art style, especially with shading.
Yeah.
And sometimes creative laziness, like the sole reason Super Saiyan was even made a thing was because Toriyama got sick of coloring Goku's hair.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that was the reason. He was too lazy to keep coloring Goku's hair every time. But of course, the other three parts of that four pillars of heaven are Vagabond, Vinland Saga, and Kingdom. Vagabond has not gotten a single anime adaptation. Kingdom and Vinland Saga have gotten them, and they've been decent, but consider how long it took to even get to that point.
Yeah.
Kingdom has a few moments of really obvious CGI, which just kills me. So I can see why
I can't say. Oh, I'm sorry.
I can see why there's that particular curse with adapting Berserk.
Yeah. I think I heard, I don't know if it's true, I might have heard a rumor of Berserk being redone again, but I can't remember if that was true or not.
There's been some fans who have done fan animations of certain scenes, but that's as far as it goes.
Okay.
Of course, the last time somebody legit tried was the 2016 version, which was not good, obviously. And I'd say part of the reason for that, from what I was able to find, is that they had two different studios trying to animate it at the same time, which is not how that usually works. You'll usually have a main studio and then occasional helper studios. But the director who was involved had only done slice of life anime up until that point. He was completely out of his depth. Imagine somebody who's 90 pounds soaking wet trying to pick a fight with a heavyweight MMA fighter. Even if they both have fight experience, there's a reason weight classes are a thing in combat sports.
Yep.
But you had already mentioned City of Mist, which I did talk about earlier on this channel, about how even in its earliest incarnations, it was struggling under the weight of being a PBTA game, because it technically was at that time, but barely.
I can't say that I know what that term means.
Powered by the Apocalypse was the system that it was using at first, but only the barest skeleton of it, which is why it's no surprise that with some of the stuff that's come from City of Mist at the team afterwards, they've opted to use what's now known as the Mist engine, as opposed to trying to make it like Powered by the Apocalypse.
Okay.
But what was it about City of Mist that you wanted to integrate into Sword in the Abyss? So
the particular version of City of Mist that I played by a specific DM that was hosting it for us at the time, it's just I really liked or enjoyed the system they had there, because we only played it like once or twice, but I quite enjoyed the system they had there with the tag system, where it was like you basically find a way of being able to use that tag. Or at least that's the way it was explained to me at the time when I was playing it.
Yeah, that tracks.
And so that system is highly inspired our calling system, which should I explain that now, or? Yeah,
let's go into that.
Yeah, so our calling system, when you go to create a character, or if you have a monster as a DM, or you have NPCs as a DM, let's just do from a player's perspective. When you go to create your champion, right, your player character, etc., when you go to create them, you have to choose or create 4 terms or 4 words, etc., that represent what your character has either lived through, or who they are, what they look like, what kind of jobs or professions they have. So as an example, you could have like some kind of a calling that says like knight or a calling that's beautiful, a calling that's something like what's a word? What's another word? A thief, and a calling that's honorable or something like this. And so with these for callings that you get at the beginning of the game, when you go to interact with the narrative side of the game through like narrative play and stuff like that, so like you're trying to convince someone to do something or something like that, you need to find a way of letting the DM know, how do we use this calling? Like what kind of arguments or what kind of ideas, why should this calling be something that you can use in this specific moment? And so like it's very helpful for you to know the background of your character, or for you to build your background of your character around these callings so that you can know how to use these things, because callings can be very situational. I use them. So that's how the system was developed. It was developed because I did not quite enjoy, like, I understand the simplicity of D&D's skill check system. Like, I'm fine with it. Like, it doesn't annoy me, and it has its place. But I wanted something that was a little bit more playful, something in the narrative side of things, like not just like from a player's ability to like D&D is a sandbox, right? So I just wanted to gamify some of the other elements there as well.
Well, most games are a sandbox, though I've seen some people try and play up the simplicity of the skill system, but those sort of non-combat skills in D&D have always been kind of an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't built with a skill system in mind the way some other games are built with their particular skill systems in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what would have become skills was originally just like the class feature for things like thief or monk.
Mm-hmm.
But moving from that,
mm-hmm.
since you brought up the fact that these callings are turns, this dovetails very nicely into something that I've talked about on this channel on multiple occasions with a lot of different games. Some taking a harsher tone than others with.
Yes.
There is a concept that I've discussed that I call blank check design. This is for some sort of rule where it's meant to be a type of descriptor, but you're not picking from a list or anything like that.
Yeah.
Examples of this would be like the aspect system in Fate. In fact, that's the one example I've been the most critical of over the years. And the problem with a good amount of blank check design entries is not providing guidance as far as where the line is between a good or a bad entry is. When it comes to the callings that CETA has,
yes,
do you plan on providing a short list of examples and the potential do's and don'ts about what it's supposed to be?
Yes, we currently have in the calling rule page, at least, we do have a list. So we do have like a list of examples that you can use immediately. Like there's a list that's presentable to you there of callings that you can choose for your character, and there's even an optional rule that gives some control back to the DM. Like the DM can decide, hey, I don't want you guys to be able to create your own callings, so here's a limited list that you can choose from instead. That is also an optional rule that exists within the game. But there is some rules there that do go into a little bit, not too in depth, of what a calling cannot be. So, like for example, like if you are not a shark, or for instance, you cannot choose a shark calling. For example, there is context to it, and there's also rules about choosing callings that are a little bit vague, like too vague, like, oh, you're a jack of all trades, stuff like that. Like that's a calling that's a little bit too vague. And so the DM can either decide to like say like, no, this is not okay, or the DM can go with like, okay, instead of giving you the bigger +2 bonus that you get to your roll test, you would instead get like a +1 because it's too vague of a calling. So it's not recommended to go with callings like that. But that is the current rendition we have. We might make improvements to it over time and polish it up a little bit. But since we're a very small indie team. We don't have a lot of experience. We want to see how it goes with the way it's currently set up and stuff like that, and see how people enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's the current status of our calling system.
Yeah, I can get that. It's the fact that you brought up what is going to disqualify is already assuring, because whenever I bring this kind of thing up, I inevitably get somebody gaslighting me saying, "Oh, you just want everything prepackaged." No, I want people to throw a bone instead of throwing me into the deep end of the pool and saying, "Swim, damn it." Yeah. But one of the other ones I find very interesting that you brought up on the influences list is Devil May Cry.
Ah, yes. So one of our other team members, I will leave it a little bit vague at the moment, just for the sake of their privacy. One of our other team members is quite the fan of Devil May Cry. I am also a fan of Devil May Cry. I'm not like a hardcore fan or anything. I just enjoy playing the action elements of the game.
You're not going to be likely to play any of the recent games in Hell and Hell mode, is what you're saying.
Yeah, probably not. I like the what's it called? Oh my god, what is that mode called where you just go up a tower in the floor and you just kind of like...
Bloody Palace.
Bloody Palace, yeah. I just like playing through Bloody Palace and stuff like that. But my friend is a little bit more into it, or our partner is a little bit more into it, and he even like records videos of him playing the game and stuff like that, and he enjoys...
Feel like a true styler?
I don't know what you call. I don't know what you call him, but he enjoys that, and he interacts with the community as well. I don't know if he actively talks to the community, but he does like watch the videos of other players doing neat little tricks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also interacted with the modding community at some point. I don't know to what degree he's interacted with.
Yeah,
but
True Styler is a subsection of those who just do those ridiculously crazy combos and put up videos of that. No, the kind of person who can go through entire missions and get nothing but triple S's.
Yes.
But one of the last ones on the influence list that I wanted to bring up is the works of Studio Ghibli. Now, that's a wide net to cast, so I'm curious which in particular, because I don't see a whole lot of DNA of say My Neighbor Totoro in this.
Yeah, so when it comes to Studio Ghibli, it's just, how do I put it? I just sometimes am enamored by what they're able to do artistically speaking. And I know, like, when you might look at Sida's art style at a glance, it might not seem like it has a lot of influences from Studio Ghibli, but there are some, how do I put it? I just like how things can be weird in Studio Ghibli. Right? Like, things can be like imaginative and just new or fresh, or maybe it is not new and fresh, it's just a little bit different. Like the character designs, like the monster designs and stuff like that in general across the board for Studio Ghibli is quite incredible. And I think internally, at least, I tried to take some inspiration from how weird they can be at times. And I like their, how do I put it? Yeah, I think that's the key word there. I think it's just the weirdness sometimes that you can get out of Studio Ghibli. So like the ones that I've watched at least is like oh my god, I am blanking for the names right now, but so Princess Mononoke, there's also the one with the small girl who gets lost in like a dream world or something like that. It's like a little train ride at some point, and there's like a hotel. I can't remember.
Spirited Away.
Yeah, Spirited Away, and then there's also oh my god, Howl's Moving Castle as well. Yeah, I just quite enjoy them, and I try to find some inspiration in them from time to time. So that's why it's marked down as an influence.
Yeah, I could certainly get that. Now, given the fact that that building characters is largely built around your choice of skills.
Yes.
I think would it be fair of me to say that the way that you approach skills would be more akin to talent trees in other games in terms of what you're getting out of each skill instead of it being a linear stat?
Yes. A talent tree is a fair comparison, I'd say. It's a very fair comparison.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why
although I'd almost lean into deck building since you talk about action cards.
Yeah. Yes, the reason it was a naming choice at that point for the action cards, and maybe at some point we had intended of actually like having players have these cards be physical things that they can hold. So I would consider that still a developmental thing, kind of like how do I put it? It's kind of like a feature that was there at one point or planned, but never was completely cut out or removed, if that makes sense.
Vestigial.
But it can, it's vestigial, exactly. It's still vestigial, but that doesn't mean that it's completely out of the picture either. Like, giving players physical cards of these things would be quite handy because there are quite a few actions in the game that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're playing in a physical environment where you don't have like a sheet that can quickly.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you plan on having like a way to look up the various actions on like a reference site, kind of like what Open Legend does.
Yeah, like a database or something akin to that. Yeah, we would very much like to have maybe even something akin to Lancer, where Lancer has its own like little character builder and stuff like that.
Now, since within that flyer that you had sent me, you talked about how you could make different archetypes, including bear cavalry. So that is a cultured reference. But I'd like to put some of that to the test. I'm not asking you to build a full character out of this. That would take way too much time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to go into some of the archetypes that you mentioned in that blurb and kind of get a feel for what particular skill groups would be the best fit for them.
Yes.
So I suppose the first one I'll start off with is Dragon Rider, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's essentially a type of cavalry setup just using a dragon.
Yes. So, so to be able to achieve that, there could be a couple of different routes that you can take. Now, forgive me. First, I would like to preface this with forgive me if I mention a feature that is not currently implemented into the game that might be still in our development sheets and will be added at some point through an update. So I would like to preface that. But one of the ways immediately that I can think of to build a Dragon Rider is you can build yourself a power-based character. Now, when I say power, the game has a couple of attributes. It has a power, speed, mana, soul, and fortitude as attributes. And each time you take one of these attributes or allocate an attribute score to your character, it increases a few of your stats for your champion. Mm-hmm. And it also unlocks a couple of skills, which, as referred to earlier by you, it could be compared to talent trees. So it's so that not the entire skill set is available to you immediately, because that would be quite a lot for you to be able to compartmentalize and stuff like that. So as you allocate attribute scores, you get access to more skills and stuff. And as you level up, you also get access to more skills. And that's just access. You get a limited amount of skill points that you can allocate to your character. And through these skill points, you can create your own archetype or class, etc. So to get to the class that we want with a Dragon Rider, I would recommend going down maybe a power tree, and you could pick up perhaps a lance as a weapon, or a spear, something that has a little bit longer range, etc. And for the dragon itself, it might take a little bit of a while for it to get to that point, but there is a skill tree or a skill section of the book that is called the trainer skills. And what that does is it allows you to have another minion kind of character that is kind of like an extension of your character as well. It's like you can customize this minion to look and feel however you might, and eventually you can even give it skills, or you can sacrifice your own skill points to give it to your minion instead. And so you could make a flying minion that you could ride into battle that is slightly larger, so you can mount it and stuff like that. And that's how you can get yourself a Dragon Rider.
Mm-hmm. All right. So another one would be Dark Knights, which I'm assuming we're dealing with the Final Fantasy type of Dark Knight, the whole casting from HP kind of thing.
Yes. So for Dark Knights, there is a way for you to cast. So for them, I would recommend possibly Mana or Fortitude as attribute choices. Fortitude, because Fortitude gives you a higher HP pool, hit point pool, and the mana side of things just allows you to have more stars for you to be able to cast more spells and stuff like that. That's debatable. The important part there is, I would say, more the hit point side of things. So for them, there is a specific skill that you can get from the mana side of things that allows you to use your hit points as a resource for generating stars, which is the resource you use for casting spells and stuff like that. And there are a few spell tomes, and a spell tomes is just a collection of different spells. And you could go for a spell tome of blood or a spell tome of darkness and stuff like that, and you can search into the game and see what kind of spells that could make your character a little bit tankier, or a little bit more, behave more like a tank, like getting the aggro from the enemy, or connecting yourself to another monster, and whenever you take damage, that monster also takes damage. Spells like that, and little abilities here and there, and you could achieve a Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm. Now, a couple ones that I wanted to kind of go into simultaneously is White Mage and Cleric, because it would be very easy for those two archetypes to bleed into each other.
Yes,
so
yes.
How would one do White Mage or Cleric in a way that makes them distinct from each other?
Makes them distinct from each other. So the game does currently have what we call the cult system. And so if you invest a skill point into the cult system, you can gain access to a specific Dark Lord, or an entity from the Abyss. Mm-hmm. And these entities are not necessarily evil, even though the title might imply that based on another universe that you might have experienced along these lines. Some of these entities can represent, good traits, like things that are good and holy, judgment, etc., and stuff like that. So you can make yourself a cleric that follows one of these dark gods as a part of a cult. And some of your powers can be based on little abilities that are accessed from your god through a favor system. And these favors that you get, it's like a resource point, the favor resources. You can spend that on the Abyssal Blessing system. You can spend those points on the Abyssal Blessings to have little events trigger either during combat or outside of combat. So that could be a clear distinctor from a cleric and a mage. Whereas a Might Mage might be just a mana-based character that's focused more on the spellcasting aspects of things. And you could access a Tome of Light or a Tome of Fire, or along these lines, and you can focus your character around healing other characters. Mm-hmm. Whereas the cleric is more about using the abilities of your Dark Lord and having a little bit more melee access and stuff like that. That in my mind could be a clear distinctor.
Yeah, I could get that. Now, since you brought up Bear Cavalry, let's go into that.
Well, much similar to the way you get a Dragon Rider, you could very much use the trainer skills to train up a bear, or like this kind of minion that looks like a bear, so eventually it becomes a pretty powerful melee combatant that doesn't fly, but you can ride on its back and pummel through your foes and stuff like that. Now, I didn't mention this earlier with the dragon, but the minion system is quite how do I put this? The trainer skills are quite comprehensive, because the way the minion works is very similar to the way that champion would work. Just the stats are a little bit diminished here and there. So a minion can be quite powerful. So you could have this bear be a flame themed bear, an icy themed bear, and you could go with so many different ways of having this bear just be an absolute wrecking ball while you ride atop it or cast spells, or maybe you're like an actual melee combatant yourself, and you strike your foes while you're mounted on the bear's back.
Whenever I've done characters who did mounted combat, instead of going with the melee approach for the character, I always went with the ranged approach, like say a horseback archer, or I think in one case using, can't remember the name of the animal, but it was very good at jumping, so a lot of death from above tactics were used, especially since instead of using like a bow and arrow, I was like, let's go with a rifle with a bayonet since this thing jumps.
Yeah, it makes sense to build a ranged character if you're mounted and stuff like that. And there are quite a few ranged options available to you, and somewhat customizable as well.
Yeah. Now, your core mechanic is a D20. I'm assuming it's the standard roll high, try and get versus the difficulty class or target number, whichever you want to call it, but it's a roll high D20 using modifiers.
Yes.
Now, given that, is it a case where the D20 is the only thing you're rolling, or are you rolling other types of die when it comes to things like damage or healing or whatnot?
All right, so the D20 die is the primary die, but we do have other dies, like you said, for like damage types. They're not damage type specific. There's like damages, mostly just damages. There are a couple of exceptions and stuff like that, but yeah, we do make use of D3s, D4s, D6s, D8s, D10s, and D12s.
I hope to God nobody tries to come to the table with a 3-sided dice. And I only say that because I've had people come up to my table with a literal D100, and I said, put that away. You leave that shit for the driving range at a golf course.
I think we are.
You've no doubt seen a D100. It looks like a golf ball.
I have not seen its size physically, and I didn't realize how large they were. I mean, it makes sense how large they are considering it's 100 sides.
Now, on the monster end of things,
yes,
obviously you're gonna have a sample bestiary, but it looks like you're also doing monster creation. Does that work similarly to character creation, or does it have its own rules?
It is similar to character creation. Because the attribute system works the same way it works for champions, the stats that you can provide your monsters and stuff. But the monsters do have some things that make them a little bit more distinct. Like they have a ranking system, and the reason why we have a ranking system is because you can place the same level monster against the same level player, but you'll have different ranks of monsters within a single level. So you have, like, level 1, for example, you have F, E, D, C, B, A, and S ranked monsters and stuff like that, each with their own difficulty and stats that they have allocated to them. But for the most part, it is mostly the same. There is guide points for you there and stuff like that for you to be able to create them.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, with that in mind, not to shift into the archetype thing, since I have to work my gimmick.
Yes.
How, in theory, would someone make a monk character within your system?
A monk character? We're talking about a unarmed character, or like,
unarmed combatant, a little bit of spiritual power, that sort of thing.
okay, so a monk type character. So we would likely go down a power and speed type attributes for this particular character. And then once we get to a specific level, like level 2, we unlock what are called stances in a specific attribute. There are a couple of different stances for power and a couple of different stances for speed. And what a stance is at the cost of a stamina, in general, you can enter the stance, and that stance gives you a bunch of different like passives and stuff. And you, based on the skills you have, you can also switch between stances. And there are rules in the game and other skills that allow you to buff your unarmed strikes. And there is a specific weapon for unarmed types. I believe they're called hand wraps along the lines to allow you to upgrade your fists as a weapon or your natural weapons, etc. There are other natural weapons in the game. There are quite a few ways you could achieve a monk, is the point that I'm trying to achieve. And if you want to have the spiritual aspect of it, you could either become a part of a cult, like your own custom cult, or use one of the ones that are currently there. Although I think the ones that are in setting, the cults that are available to you, most of those probably won't fit well from monk type character. But you can create your own custom one, and you can essentially ask favor from the gods and stuff like that. Or alternatively, you could have some spells. There are a couple of stances that allow you to cast spells while you're in the stance using a different resource, but it gives you access to a limited amount of spells, like a specific tome. So you could be a monk that focuses on flaming strikes and stuff like that. So you could have access to like the tome of fire and stuff like that.
And
so there are quite a few methods. Yes?
I'm guessing that, speaking of magic use, I'm guessing that magic use is just as answerable to this skill system. It's not entirely a whole different thing that requires a significant amount of preparation and slots. But I'm dancing around it a little bit, but I'm basically saying this isn't doing the Vancian model.
I'm not sure I know what the Vancian model means. Forgive me.
The spells per day thing that you see in D&D and Pathfinder is colloquially known as the Vancian model. It is because it is drawing upon Jack Vance as one of its primary inspirations, especially the Dying Earth RPG, which is a bit ironic given that the actual Dying Earth RPG doesn't use it. But that whole thing of needing to prepare your spells in advance, having a certain number of spell charges that you can use, and having to wait an 8-hour rest, along with those spells being very fire and forget, that is part of the Vancian model.
Yeah, so Siddha's spells are quite distinct from those, yes. We don't have a spell slot type of system where you can only cast like 1/3 spell slot per day and 2, etc., etc. We don't have that. We have a very simple system. Spells will cost a certain amount of stars to cast, and the way you generate stars in the game is a little bit different to what you might expect. It depends on your skill set, but in general, the way you generate a star is you spend a stamina on an action card that did not cost any stars to use. So like when you perform a basic attack action, you spend 1 stamina to do that, you will gain 1 star in return for doing so. Now, more spellcaster heavy characters have, some skills that might give them a couple of stars for free per turn and stuff like that. But that's the general gist of it. You generate stars. It's kind of like a snowball-y kind of effect. You use abilities, you use your action cards. It encourages the players to use different actions that's not just your spells, so that you can generate stars. And it's a system that kind of like goes around in a loop, right? It gets players thinking about different combos they could achieve.
Yeah. The dopamine loop is there. You use stamina to get stars, you use stars to cast spells.
Yes, exactly.
And one of the other reasons that I brought up the Vincent model, especially with that whole spell charges thing, is it results in the rainy day paradox, or also known as too good to use.
Yes.
Stop me if you've heard this one before. I can't use my Uber spell right now. What if I need it for later in the session? He says it's fighting the final boss of the campaign.
Yep. So like that's one of the reasons. So I specifically wanted to do our own system because it's like, first of all, it's like you have this cool ass spell, you want to cast it, but you can only do that like once or twice, and it's like, do I do it now? Do I do it later? And it's like sometimes you might end up never casting the spell and never doing the thing. So that's why we went with our system where it's more like a cycle.
Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is I'm assuming that even though you're spending stamina in order to get stars, it's not like you have to go through some long resting period in order to get stamina back.
No, you don't. So every time you start your turn, as a standard character, there are exceptions. A standard character will generate 3 stamina at the start of their turn, which they can use to spend on different action cards or abilities.
Mm-hmm. Which I can certainly get. And obviously, as someone further develops, or depending on how they build their character, they're going to be recovering more stamina than others.
Yes, like speed characters, for example. Once they get to specific stat thresholds, they unlock another stamina. Mm-hmm. Like they'll get like 4 stamina per turn, and eventually, the highest level ones, you get like 4 stamina per turn. 5 stamina per turn.
Now, are spells fire and forget, or would there be a way to mess about with the effects of a spell?
So fire and forget. You're gonna have to. What I understand by that is you cast a firebolt, right? And you do the damage, etc., and you forget about the spell. Is that what you mean?
Not exactly. Fire and forget means that fireball is going to do the specific things of that spell's entry, in this case fireball, and nothing else. Can't mess around with to make the fireball bigger, smaller, or any of that. It does this one particular thing, much in the way that a computer program is going to do that one program and nothing else.
Okay, so it's whether or not spells are fixed, I guess. Okay, so no, our spells are not fixed. Sornibus said it has a very, what are called augmentation magic or augmentation spells. You can use as many augmentation spells as you can, as long as you have the mana to be able to spend on those. For example, you can convert a humble firebolt spell, which is normally a target spell that does damage to one target, and you can invest some augmentation magic into it to modify its to turn it into an AoE spell, into a shape spell. You can turn it into a line spell, into a sphere spell, something like that. So you can turn the.
Can you do a chain spell?
A chain spell. I'm not sure I know what that means. Sorry.
You're familiar with chain lightning, yes?
Chain lightning, yes. You hit one target and it jumps from another one to another one.
Yeah, jumps from another one. You keep doing it as long as you keep hitting, and there's eligible targets. You just can't target the same thing twice.
Yes. So you could use a spell fusion ability that's in the game. So you could modify the firebolt and spell fusion with another spell that it has that effect, which I believe is also a Tome of Spark spell. Mm-hmm. And you should be able to achieve that effect where you get chain firebolt.
Yeah. And I suppose one of the other ones that I'd ask is, especially given the emphasis on a tactical map setup, is whether or not someone could make spell traps.
Spell traps. Okay, so we're talking about like placing like a little rune on the floor or something like that, and when somebody walks on it,
Yeah.
it might trigger a spell cast.
Sure.
There are features for that. I just cannot tell you whether they're within the game right now. There's a specific tome within the game that lets you store spells in a trap kind of method.
Yeah.
Yes, there are ways for you to do this.
I've told people the story in the past, but one of my earliest characters messed around with traps in a way that would make Chuck Jones smile. And some of the infamous ones were Summon Anvil, which is depending on your approach is exactly what you think it is. It is not making an anvil appear right next to you. It is doing the anvil drop. But the more infamous one was the up button. You step on the trap, you go straight up at about 40 miles an hour for about 6 seconds.
Dear Lord.
And this culminated in a dragon stepping on the thing in a cave lined with adamantite, so you had an unstoppable force and an immovable object. Because adamantite doesn't budge for anything. So...
Dear God.
So, when you have that kind of situation of it's supposed to move up, but there's no rule saying what to do if it's up against something that isn't going to budge. So I think you can figure out what happened next.
Yeah.
A lot of chunky souls.
How was your DM after that?
Well, he was when it first happened. He was like, "Okay, he hits the ceiling, then comes back down." And I had said, "No, he doesn't. It hasn't been 6 seconds." That's the adamantite. He's not going to break through that. The spell does not care. The spell does not know the difference between stone and flesh, and does not care. So
I
mean,
yeah.
we all had to roll Constitution to avoid losing our lunch, because we just got sprayed with dragon guts.
Yep.
And then immediately after the whole thing is done, one of my buddies says, "Hey, free meat! Hey, free meat for us!" But it's good. It's good that kind of thing is present, since if you're going with this approach of customization, it's important to have that. And to that end, I'm curious if you have plans on putting like step-by-steps of different pre-gens to ease the analysis paralysis issue that can happen.
You mean pre-gens of spells or pre-gens of champions?
Of champions.
We did have in development. We actually created a few pre-builds or codex of builds and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We do have intentions of releasing one at some point, but for now we don't have one available publicly. Mm-hmm. But we do have intentions of adding it because at least I personally feel like having these examples available is going to make it a little bit easier for players to understand how they could go about creating their character. And if you're just giving players a level 1 character, the game is so customizable that level 1 build could easily become something else as you play through the game with it. Or alternatively, we could provide a champion that goes all the way from level 1 to level 10. But I feel like that would be quite a bit much for the spirit of the game.
Yeah. To put it another way, consider the idea of classes in a Souls-like. Like they call the starting part of character creation picking a class, but practically speaking, it's not a class.
Yeah, exactly. These like little level 1 builds that you could have would be fairly handy for players to start the game, especially new players.
Yeah, or you could pick the deprived if you feel like a masochist.
Oh, Dark Souls! I actually played as oh my god, what's it called in Elden Ring? I don't remember a specific name for it, but I did play that one in Elden Ring. Mm-hmm. Unlike the other games.
Yeah, I call it deprived just to keep things simple, but it's basic. But it's the archetype where you've got absolutely nothing and you've got ones and everything.
Yep, yep. That was a fun time. I played through Dark Souls 1, or no, Dark Souls 2, 3, and Elden Ring.
Yeah.
Like I include Elden Ring in there because it's basically like supersized Dark Souls.
Yeah, I would get on. I would make jokes about masochism, but then I remember I play Kaizo Mario, so I've got no room to talk.
Kaizo Mario. What is this?
Obviously, Kaizo comes from modified in Japanese. These are ROM hacks of various Mario games, where the idea is to make the most punishing and unforgiving and borderline masochistic kind of level.
Why do I feel like I might have watched some of this content before? I feel like I have. I don't know if it was this specific or if it was one of those Mario Maker kind of games.
Yeah, this kind of thing predates Mario Maker. It started with the ROM hack community. And eventually, I guess somebody at Nintendo saw that people were making custom versions of levels, so just decided to make the job easier with Mario Maker. And I have seen some people make levels where just the sheer amount of moving stuff that's happening, and you've only got 100 seconds. It's a good way to get your heart rate up. Now, shifting from that, one of the things I wanted to touch on, that's something that a lot of games try to do and struggle with, or some games claim that they claim you can do anything, and then when it comes to this particular thing, they leave that blank because they want people to come up with it themselves. Looking at you, 5e, and that is crafting. I am petty enough to get on the devs of 5e for leaving crafting blank with that and giving that excuse of, oh, we made it blank so that people could come up with their own crafting systems.
No,
people are going to do that anyways, but at least throw me a bone.
Yeah, so for Sword in the Abyss, we have crafting. There are 3 crafters within the game currently, and the 3 crafting skill sets that you can go for are a rune carver, an alchemist, and a kitcher. Now, what these 3 crafting skill sets allow you to do is that there are a couple of items in the game that you can craft as long as you have the resources to do so and the time to do so. And based on their names, you can kind of guess what each crafter can do for the most part. Well, at least the alchemist you can. The rune carver is very much almost like a magical blacksmith in some terms, so you can craft, or rather alter your equipment in the game. So you could take your arming sword, for example, and you can upgrade it with runes and stuff like this. And then there's the alchemist, which there is an assortment of potions, like drinkables and tossables, that you can craft, and some specific items as well. And you can mix and match these items as well. For the alchemist, in the alchemist case, you can like create a bomb that spreads poison of a specific kind, or along those lines. Or you can create a bomb that heals people. Little weird, wacky things you can do as an alchemist. And then there's the kitcher, which is a cooking related. I'm sorry, I keep wanting to say crafting class, but that's because of a development term that we were using. And so what the kitchen allows you to do is it lets you empower the party when you take a rest or sit down. You can like put down a couple ingredients in a pot, and depending on what ingredients you use and how many ingredients you use, it makes the pot more difficult to cook and stuff like that. And it's like little buffs here and there for your party. And there's also, with the kitchen specifically, you can also attempt to steal monster skills and certain abilities as long as you have the flesh and stuff available to you. As for crafting specific components of the game, like, oh, I want to craft an arming sword and I don't have any of the things available to me, you can technically craft the sword as long as you have supplies, but it is still a little bit up in the air. But there are plenty of items already in the game that you can craft from a list from.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, with that said, what would you be shooting for as far as a total page count for the core book?
Oof, are we talking about right now, or are we talking about by the time it is fully fleshed out?
Let's go with an estimate, like where it is now and where you potentially see it going.
So right now, if I have the countdown correctly, it is approximately around 320 odd pages, 330 along those lines there. By the time it's done, it could potentially go up to maybe somewhere in the 400 page ballpark. That's mostly just due to the fact that the core rulebook is packed with things like, a monster library, all the skills that the players need. It has DM rules. It has setting text in it. It has a lot, and so that's why the book is pretty large when compared to something like, I don't know, well, I wouldn't say compared to. It's more like it's equatable to the size of like a player's handbook or something like that.
Yeah,
but it has
a pretty standard size for an all-in-one core book.
Yeah,
I can usually put under 250 to 350. It tends to be the standard range when it comes to a crunch medium or crunch heavy core book.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since the idea of splitting into multiple core books is a minority.
Mm-hmm.
Like besides D&D, there's not a whole lot of games that really do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I think of ones that do that, maybe I was gonna say Traveler 5, but I do not want to touch Traveler 5 anytime soon after the last time I did.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm being honest, that's one game that does that. Doing it in one book is a bad idea, just because of all the stuff you got to account for.
Mm-hmm.
But I will certainly be looking forward to seeing how Sword in the Abyss develops. Especially seeing what sort of crazy ass builds people end up making, and if I have to bully people into making a muscle wizard, I will do that. because how could you hate the muscle wizard? It is somebody who casts spells by flexing like he's a bodybuilder. But.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens here.
Mm-hmm.
And
Go
ahead.
I'm grateful for you inviting me here as well. It's been a pleasure so far.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As
Mm-hmm.
I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Thank you for the invitation again.
And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Soy, yo la cuna, yo 上楽が上長年